Hello and welcome back to the CQ certification training. We are moving on to our next module. We've kind of gone through the quick setup process, unpacks the Nimbus if it's premise or in the cloud, how to kind of do your initial network settings, how to set up your inbound routes, your outbound routes for calling in and out, your SIP trunks, and then how to get a phone registered manually. We are now going to move on to kind of some of the more complex call routing. We're going to start today by taking a look at basically open and closed hours, and then holidays. How do you factor that in so your phones automatically switch from open to closed? And then also how can you build a button or a code for a user to close early, or go on an emergency remotely, trigger that. So that starts with time groups. So if we go under applications, you'll see time groups at the bottom. So time groups are basically your open and closed hours, and it's your holidays. So I like to break this into two separate time groups. So I'll first start with my, and this is if a customer, not every customer wants to do holidays. Some customers prefer just to keep things simple. But let's just assume they want to do holidays. So I'll give it a name. And then I'm going to add my various holidays, the days that are going to be closed. So in this case, let's just say December 25th. So we're going to be closed on Christmas. So if you do December 25 to December 25, that's just going to be all day, December 25. If you do December 25 to 26, that's going to basically put them on holiday mode 25th and 26th. And you can do times as well if you'd like. I like to just do full days. It's easier. So then you can add. So you can put in all of your holidays into the same time group. So let's just say they're also going to be closed January 1st. You don't have to put in any times or any days of the week. You don't have to fill this in. So this is just going to put them in holiday mode all of January 1st. And so you can kind of go through here, put in the rest of your holidays if you want. It's up to the customer if they want to fill in or provide this for you, obviously. So, say they want to be closed the 21st. So this is going to close them 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. And you can just keep adding all the way down. Right. So that's the first one, is to kind of create your time group. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. You can always go back in there and edit that later. I'm also going to create a business hours time group. Right. So in this case, this is a little bit different. It's typically 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 8 to 17. You don't have to put zeros there. You can if you want, but you don't have to. So this is going to be 8 to 5 Monday through Thursday, and you don't have to fill in things for month if you're just doing days of the week. And then maybe they're open from 8 to noon on Friday. Friday to Friday. And they're also so this is when is the business open. So 8 to 5 Monday through Thursday, 8 to noon Friday, and maybe they're open Saturday from 10 to 2. So we'll say Saturday. So you don't have to put, if they're not open Sunday, don't put it in here. So this is business hours. Right? So go ahead, that's fine. You can keep adding these if you want. If you want to do, say that they're open from 8 to noon. So for example, some people are like this. 8 to noon Monday through Thursday. And then 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock Monday through Thursday. So this gives them a lunch period. So 8 to noon Monday through Thursday, 8 to noon Friday, 10 to 2 Saturday, and then 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock Monday through Thursday. That's an example of what your time group could be. And you can create as many of these as you'd like to utilize. This is also the point where you're going to see the time that the server thinks it is. There are some times, especially for a premise system, if you're moving it around, where it might not think it's the right time. And so just take a note here to make sure this is accurate. One thing I may not have mentioned earlier, setting the time zone for your system. If you go to System Admin and then Time Zone, this is where you set the time for your system. And it does give you a warning here. Once you do this, you need to submit it and then reboot your system. And remember, rebooting is done through the Power Options tab right here. So if you're West Coast or somewhere in the middle of the country, change it, save it, and then reboot it using the Power Options. All right, so let's go back to our time groups. All right, so we've created a couple of time groups. So now the question is, okay, well, so what? You've created time groups. So this goes hand in hand with time conditions. Time conditions decides where calls go based on your time groups. So step one, make your time groups. Decide if they want to do holidays. Decide if they've got set business hours. Then go to your time conditions. You can either go to Applications Time Conditions, or there's a link in time groups because they're so tightly tied together. You can do List Time Conditions, and there's none here. So let's add one. And it's pretty straightforward. Right, so we'll just call this Holidays. You're hardly ever going to change these top things. Just leave them alone, and then come down here, and you get to assign the time group that this uses. Right? So notice this fills in with the time groups that we made. So this time condition looks at this time group, and if it matches, destination matches, meaning it's a holiday, you get to decide where that call goes. Right? So maybe that goes to a holiday greeting, maybe that goes to a voicemail. We'll get into that further into programming, but let's just say we're going to send it to voicemail. Right? That's probably not the typical holiday. Typically, you'd probably send it to a holiday greeting. Thanks for calling. We're closed for Christmas. Call us back. Something like that. But we'll work on that later. So destination matches. If it doesn't match, meaning if you remember back to that holiday time group I made, it was December 25, January 1. The vast majority of days in the calendar did not match. So that means those calls are going to go to destination not matches. And if it's not a holiday, maybe we want it to ring a phone, right? So then you would set that to go to a phone. So there's your holiday time conditions. It either matches, if the call comes and it matches a holiday, it goes here. If it doesn't match a holiday, it goes here. Now what you should do really is actually combine your two time conditions. So I'm going to go back to my time conditions, and I'm going to create another one, and I'm going to show you how these get tied together. When I'm doing this actually on my own, I would work my way backwards. So I probably would have started with this one. So we'll call this business hours. Okay. The time group, we want this to use our business hours time group, which was the Monday through Thursday, Friday, Saturday. If that matches, we want that to ring a phone. Mark. And usually it might go to a ring group or an auto attendant, but that's further on down the road. If it doesn't match, we want it to go to voicemail, meaning we're closed. You could send it to a closed message. And once again, you get the idea. It's a fork in the road. You're either open, it's your business hours, and it goes here, or you're not, and it goes here. Now what I would do, let's see if we can follow this here. I would go to my holidays, call comes in, it asks, is it a holiday? It looks at this time group. If it is, it plays a voicemail. If it's not, the system says, okay, it's not a holiday. Are you open? So it sends it to another fork in the road. All right, so it matched a holiday. If it doesn't match a holiday, the system says, okay, well, are you open or are you closed? So you can kind of follow this path in the system, and then you would go to your, right now, just by making these, they will not be used. They're just sitting here. It's like having somebody on the bench for a game. They're available, but they're not actually playing. These are available, but they're not actually in use. So what you need to do is go to your inbound route, and you need to tell the system that if someone calls this phone number, the first thing it should do is look to see if it's a holiday. Okay, so someone calls this number, the system sends it to this time condition holiday, where it asks a question. Is it a holiday or is it not a holiday? If it is a holiday, it goes to the voicemail. If it's not a holiday, it sends it to this question. Time conditions, business hours. Okay, so if it's not a holiday, it goes here, where the system goes, okay, are you open or are you closed? If you're open, it goes here. If you're closed, it goes here. What you've done is you just successfully created holidays and business hours, and they're actually in use now, and you can see how they're tied together. Typically, most calls go to the holiday first, and if it doesn't match, it goes to your business hours. Now, these are very static. This is going to basically set open and closed hours immediately. At 8 o'clock, your phones will ring. At 5 o'clock, they'll stop ringing. And you don't have to do anything. Your hours are set. Set it, forget it. You don't have to press any buttons. Calls will route holidays, not holidays. Really, the only maintenance here is if your business hours changes, your customer will tell you. And obviously, there's maintenance with holiday time groups. There's a fair amount of holidays that float. So you're probably going to have to each year come in here, adjust it for the next year, or adjust it for the current year, and then save it. And then the system will route it accordingly. Right? So that is kind of how we set calendars for holidays and business hours. Now, the other thing I want to talk about was, what if you want like an on-demand one, an emergency? This is very static. Comes in, is it a holiday, yes or no? Are we open, yes or no? Well, what if you live in a state with, snowstorms, hurricanes, where you potentially are going to be closed on days that are normally open? So how can you set your system to account for that? And what that is called a call flow control. So call flow control is like an on-demand toggle that sends calls. Think of it as like a train track where you can flip it between one way or the other by pressing a lever. And this is just by dialing a code on the system. So if we add a call flow control, let's just call it emergency. Right. So in the current mode, normal, green, calls are going to go here. So under a normal condition, calls go to your holiday time condition. So really it's a pass-through. If it's not in use, calls just go right through. Is it a holiday? Am I open or am I closed? It kind of follows that path we just talked about. But what allows them to do is they can toggle it using a code, and the system will flip it to override. And override, let's just say, goes to voicemail. Typically you'd send it to some emergency message, which we'll talk about later. We'll kind of build this out together as we go. So if we save this, okay, you can see right now, there's the feature code you dial, star 280. Right now it's in day mode, or it's in green. If you come in here, right here, it's in green mode, which means calls are going to go straight to the question of, is it a holiday? So in most situations, this is a pass-through. Calls just go through it. But if the user dials that code, star 280, or they'd log in and flip it themselves, you can flip it and switch it right there. But if they toggle it by star 280, and you can do this via mobile app remotely, you don't have to be on site. But if you toggle it via the code star 280, or in the case this is the web interface, it puts it in night mode, and we can see here that night mode is the emergency, it's the override, and it's going to go to voicemail. Now typically you'd go to some message, special message, and it will stay there until you toggle it back. It's not going to toggle back on its own, which is good for emergencies. If you want to just say, hey, we're closed, I'm not sure when we're going to reopen, toggle it here, and calls will stay in override until you dial that same code, star 280, and it'll switch it back to normal. And you can change it for customers just by logging in and making this change. And you can see now it's back in day mode. Now what you need to do is you need to go back to your inbound route, because once again, that's just on the bench. It's not actually in the game. you need to go to your inbound route. If somebody calls this phone number, instead of going straight to the holiday question, we should go to the call flow control question. And then the system goes, okay, what's the call flow control set for? Okay, it's green, send it to the holiday question. If the user has toggled it, it'll go right to the voicemail and bypass the holidays and the time, the business hours. So now you have created both static hours, and you've created the ability for the end user, if they have the mobile app, to toggle it into emergencies remotely, and it'll stay there until you toggle it back. In our next installment, we will be working on building this out. Obviously, it's still pretty raw. We have yet to talk about IVRs, ring groups, emergency messages, other messages that the customers will hear. But for now, this gives you an idea of how to do holidays, business hours, and emergency call flow controls. And you can create as many of these as you want. You can have more than one call flow control toggle on the phone system.